Mistakes are an unavoidable part of any movie. Yet every so often there's a basic mistake so revealing, so unconscionable, so unforgivable that it basically causes the film as a whole to unravel within itself. But some movies are able to weather these gaffes better than others. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture, and here are 10 basic mistakes that ruin movies. Number 10. 5 years to go backwards? Ready Player One. In Ready Player One, Wade, played by Ty Sheridan, manages to beat the first Oasis challenge by doing the one thing nobody else had thought of, running the treacherous race backwards, resulting in him receiving the coveted copper key. Now, it's stated that this challenge remained unbeaten for 5 years before Wade pulled it off, and so we're led to believe that for an entire half-decade, no one tried driving backwards at the start of the race? Come on! If you know anything about gamers, and chances are there's a few of you watching right now, not to scare anyone or anything, well, they're an inquisitive bunch and will try anything and everything to test the bounds of a video game's limitations. With that in mind, it would have taken mere minutes for someone to figure out that driving backwards was the key to victory. But it took the collective player base 5 years to figure out something so howlingly obvious is all the proof you need that this story was written by someone who isn't actually well versed in video games at all. Number 9. The Magic Ambulance. Die Hard. It can be shockingly easy for the entire cast and crew of a movie to overlook the finer details while shooting. Case in point, Die Hard's climax sees Hans Gruber, played by the legendary Alan Rickman, planning to escape Nakatomi Plaza in an ambulance which is housed inside a giant truck the crooks emerged out of at the very start of the film. Except the ambulance very clearly wasn't in the truck when we saw the guys come out of it, and there definitely wasn't room for it to contain both a fleet of bad guys and an ambulance. I mean, what are we to believe? That this is some kind of magic truck? And yeah, the fact that you haven't even realized that this was a thing is a testament to how great Die Hard is, and how much this doesn't really matter, even if on paper it does kind of destroy Gruber's plot. But we don't care, because Die Hard's like the greatest action movie ever made. Or Predator. Both are John McTiernan, and they're both amazing, and I love them. Anyway, as it turns out, our boy McTiernan freely admits the mistake, a result of Die Hard's script being reworked on the fly during filming. If you like that Toys That Made Us documentary series that was on Netflix a few years back, they did a movie equivalent, and Die Hard was spotlighted in there, and yeah, it's a really fun presentation on how that movie was made, and they go into the whole ambulance thing there. When McTiernan filmed the early shot of Gruber's boys emerging from the truck, he didn't yet know the ambulance would also be stored in there. While it's admittedly a mistake that few fans have actually noticed over the last 3+ decades of the movie's existence, it does somewhat break its otherwise watertight logic once you're aware of it. The villain's getaway vehicle just wills itself into existence out of nowhere as if by magic. And again, I don't care, this movie's perfect, and also I think McTiernan is allowed to do that. He's allowed his magic ambulance. Let him have that thing. Number 8. That's not how Double Jeopardy works. Double Jeopardy. 1999's legal thriller Double Jeopardy, which may as well be Triple Jeopardy given I've mentioned it 3 times already, revolves around Libby Parsons, played by Ashley Judd, a woman falsely convicted of her husband Nick's murder, who in fact faked his death and framed her for it. Oh, Bruce Greenwood, you crafty guy, you. And so, Libby hatches a plan to get paroled as soon as possible and kill Nick for real, because per the apparent logic of the Double Jeopardy clause of the Fifth Amendment, a person cannot be convicted of the same crime twice. The film supposes that this allows Libby to kill Nick with legal immunity, a hilarious misreading of the law, which undermines the very premise of the movie itself. And look, I love me some schlocky 90s legal thrillers. Give me all those Grisham adaptations, but this is pretty egregious. So, the double jeopardy clause in real life prevents a person being convicted twice for the same specific event, but Libby killing Nick for real would be its own separate incident, and so she would still be entirely prosecutable. It's a glaring, easily avoided factual inaccuracy which totally tanks the movie, though it's unclear whether the filmmakers simply failed to do their research or intentionally twisted legal precedent for the sake of a juicy crime thriller and went, yeah. Number 7. The Scarred Hand Plot Hole, The Butterfly Effect. The Butterfly Effect is an entertaining enough movie if you're able to forgive its flawed time travel logic, but there's one flabbergasting oversight that's ultimately too much for a lot of people to look past. Midway through the film, Evan, played by Ashton Kutcher, ends up in prison, and in an attempt to prove to his cellmate that he can time travel, travels back to his childhood and impales his hands on his schoolteacher's sharp notepad holder. This causes scars to suddenly appear on his hands in the present, instantly convincing his cellmate that he does indeed have the time juice. Except that's not how the firmly established rules of cause and effect work in the movie up to this point. If Evan injured his hands as a child, then the scars should have always been visible to his cellmate. And more to the point, given the film's central theme of small changes having a potentially huge impact on a person's life, it's odd that Evan impaling his hands as a child didn't alter his life path at all. He still wound up in prison with the exact same cellmate. Guys, rookie error. Look, as neat as the film's concept is, the filmmakers clearly didn't put enough thought into the minor details, or at least hope that audiences en masse wouldn't consider it too deeply, which is a big gamble when you've got Ashton Kutcher as your lead. Number 6. The title makes no sense. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Sequel to the ultimate vibes horror movie, I Know What You Did Last Summer, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer was tripped up before audiences had even seen a single frame of it, given that its title somehow makes even less sense than the hilariously convoluted story itself. The sequel is set a year after the original film, which itself primarily takes place a year following the fateful car accident involving Julie James, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, and her ill-fated pal. Rounded out, of course, by the brilliant Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. Also, side note, Helen Shivers, great name, and also one of the best horror movie characters of the 90s. Amazing escape sequence until she dies, which is really sad. I really like I Know What You Did Last Summer, so it deserves its flowers. The sequel, though, well, that's a different story. Exemplified weirdly by its title. The film takes place 2 years after the events of the original, meaning that the killer would still know about the incident from 2 summers prior. Not last summer, come on! Granted, I Still Know What You Did 2 summers ago doesn't exactly roll off the tongue from a marketing perspective, and honestly sounds like a parody of the original film that should star Leslie Nielsen, but at least it's basically factually accurate, right? Number 5. Q's unbelievable stupidity, Skyfall. Skyfall is an excellent movie for the most part, but starts to fall apart if you commit much thought to how overwhelmingly convoluted its villain's plan actually is. Antagonist Raul Silver, played by Javier Bardem, is captured at the end of the second act, but this is ultimately just part of his hilariously contrived plan to try and assassinate Judi Dench's M at a parliamentary inquiry. Silver's plan hinges on his confiscated laptop being directly connected to MI6's servers by Ben Wishaw's Q, allowing him to escape. And while you might expect such lackluster technological security from your great uncle, an expert hacker employed by the government who definitely knows better, not quite. The idea that Q connected Silver's laptop to MI6 without any sort of air gapping or other security in place is kind of really silly, and basically torpedoes the entirety of the third act, given that Silver's whole ploy is reliant upon Q's unbelievable stupidity. Again, Skyfall's third act itself is beautiful and wonderful, and much of the movie itself is great too, but this is just one weird oversight you kind of can't help but think about every time you watch. Number 4. Blood types break the plot. Face Off. Now, to be fair, anyone who reads too much into the scientific implausibilities of John Woo's Face Off is rather missing the point. But for as much as the movie glosses over most of the dubious face-swapping details, it doesn't do itself any favors by bringing up the central character's different blood types. It's stated early on that FBI agent Sean Archer, played to perfection by John Travolta, and villain Castor Troy, obviously an amazing Nicolas Cage, have different blood types, as is ultimately how Archer is able to convince his wife Eve, Joan Allen, that his face and identity have been stolen by Troy. But for the scientists in the crowd, this immediately breaks the movie's admittedly flimsy-ass grasp on logic, which again might be weird to say given this is a film that features a whole magnetized sci-fi prison segment, but whatever. Archer's blood type is said to be O, while Troy's is AB, and though the AB blood type can receive blood and tissue donations from any blood type, they can only donate to AB recipients. And so, while Troy's body would have been able to accept Archer's face transplant, Archer's body would have rejected Troy's face, ensuring Troy's entire plan would have been a big old flop. But again, it's Face Off. If you're able, you should just cast things like basic scientific fact aside and just enjoy the balmy, adrenalized ride. Number 3. Nightmare Fuel Donatello. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 1990. Higher fidelity re-releases of beloved movies can breathe whole new life into them, or they can reveal horrifying details you really wish your eyeballs never had to see. And the latter is sadly true of 1990's live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, because if you watch it on Blu-ray today, the guy in suit's presentation of the Turtles becomes less charming and, in one scene, kind of nightmarish. About an hour into the film, which by the way is secretly one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, when Leonardo and Raphael are having a chit-chat, they're greeted by April O'Neil and Donatello. Donatello laughs, the mouth on his suit opening wide, and giving the audience a brief moment to see the teeth of his on-set flesh and blood suit performer, Leif Tilden. This is sadly one of those visuals you'll never be able to unsee whenever you revisit the film, so if you haven't yet upgraded to the Blu-ray, which I haven't, not by any deliberate means, maybe just stick to your DVD and preserve those precious childhood memories. TURTLE power. What a banger. Number 2. Average Joe's Cheated. Dodgeball, a true underdog story. Dodgeball, a true underdog story, doesn't really work as a movie if schlub Peter LaFleur, played by Vince Vaughn, and his Jim Average Joes aren't likable heroes who triumph over the tyrannical Globo Jim against massive odds. But Average Joe's victory in the climactic Dodgeball tournament is tainted by one unfortunate filmmaking gaffe. During the final sudden death phase between Peter and rival White Goodman, played to perfection by Ben Stiller, Peter breaks the rules. You see, the referee very clearly states that, quote, both feet must remain in the triangle at all times, but the wide shot of Peter's winning throw shows his left foot blatantly outside of that triangle. Never believe in anything, folks. Your heroes will just let you down. This should have immediately invalidated the victorious throw, ensuring that Peter only got to keep Average Joe's afloat by cheating, or if you want to be more charitable to him, unknowingly breaking the rules. He is blindfolded at this point after all. Even so, given that Dodgeball's ending is meant to be a fist-pumping moment of satisfaction for the audience, the fact that Peter only achieved it through deeply dodgy means makes it, and in turn the entire through line of the film, feel somewhat hollow. Please don't throw a wrench at me for being a narc about this movie, it will hurt my face. And number 1, that ain't Dallas, The X-Files. Alright, so ruin might be a bit of a stretch in this case, but even so, if you know anything about American geography, then you'll probably be thrown way off by the Dallas, Texas setting of 1998's original X-Files film. The movie kicks off by showing Dallas as a dusty, deeply orange desert city, which couldn't be further from what Dallas, and really Texas as a whole, actually is. In fact, less than 10% of the real-life Texas has what could be considered a desert climate, and Dallas specifically doesn't resemble one at all. It's actually an incredibly populous, not remotely dusty metropolis that's far more green than orange. Like, did no one watch the show with JR and him getting shot and Bobby in the shower? It was all there! All the evidence was right there! So, as it turns out, The X-Files was actually shot primarily in Los Angeles, and the filmmakers simply decided to uphold the wildly incorrect, yet oddly widespread belief that vast swaths of Texas are in fact a desert. For Texas natives, or anyone who's ever visited the Lone Star State, this opening scene makes the film totally laughable from the very beginning.